Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caroline Player, and on behalf of the Georgia Tech Alumni Association and our Career Services Department, I would like to welcome you to today's Management Gold webinar on coaching your team. So Adrian Johnston, our leader for today, has done multiple sessions with us before, Professional Gold, Management Gold. If you haven't joined us for one of her other sessions, we hope you'll do that. For those of you who already know Adrian, fantastic. But for those of you who may be joining for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about our speaker. Adrian Johnston is a tech chemistry alumna. Her passion for forming teams and building careers began here at Georgia Tech when she was part of the founding management team at Starbucks here at Technology Square. She honed these interests at VendorMate, rising through the ranks to become Vice President of Operations. After leaving VendorMate, she led user experience for KidsLink, and she is now Vice President of Operations at Buckhead Investment Partners. And I'm going to turn the program over to her in just a second, but wanted to mention to you all, if you aren't on mute at this point, you can click the microphone, sort of the anti-microphone button, to make that orange on the right beside your name. That would be fantastic, just to avoid any background noise during the course of this presentation. We would also love for this to be interactive. And to do that, let's use the chat window. You'll see that either in the upper pull down or on the right-hand side of your screen. Just click on that chat window, bring that up. If you have any questions or comments during or after the presentation, just let us know there. Without further delay, I'm going to turn this over to Adrian.
Thank you, Caroline, and hi, everybody. It's great to be with you today. I am going to go ahead and get us started here in talking about coaching your team. And so what we're going to cover today in approximately 35 to 45 minutes is identifying what coaching is, understanding why it's important to your career development and your abilities as a manager, how to actually go about the process of coaching your team, developing those skills, what are the action steps that you should take. And then collaboratively as a group, we'll do a chat session where we not only ask and answer questions, but we'll also go through the process of identifying individual ways that you want to go about implementing some of these particular steps and skills in your process as a manager. So to get started, it's really important that we ground ourselves in what coaching really is. So as a manager, it's important that you understand the talent management cycle. And this is kind of a human resources way to look at the team and the management process. And depending upon the size of your organization, the scope of your role, the way that you participate in each of these individual elements may vary. But the concept is that as you have an employee or a member of your team, they're going to go through a full life cycle with your organization, in some cases multiple. You have a talent acquisition process. That's how do you go about sourcing, recruiting, finding talented people who may be a good fit for your organization. Last month, we specifically talked about the employee selection process. So after you've identified those potential pool of candidates, how do you select which one's going to be the right fit for the team, the organization, and the role that you're hiring for? Then you go about bringing those people after you've made them an offer and they've accepted. How do you go about onboarding them into the organization? Getting them trained, getting them developed, getting them up to speed on everything from the basics of where do you find paper clips all the way up to the cultural expectations, not only of the role, but of the entire organization, making sure that they're truly bought into the organization, that they feel like they're a part of the team, and that is a process. You'll also need to make sure that you're continuing to train and develop those individuals so they continue to grow and thrive in their role. The key element of that is obviously performance management and coaching. How do we go about making sure that people understand the expectations of their role, that they're getting the proper feedback on how to better perform, to become more effective in that role, so that ultimately they can succeed, the team can exceed, the company can exceed. And ultimately what you'd hope for that employee is that you can look at them as a source for succession planning in your organization so that you can groom them to be ready for additional roles, potentially higher level roles. It could be lateral moves, but that those individuals effectively through the process of succession planning become sources of talent for future roles in your organization. And so the idea is that you would keep employees moving through this cycle, continuing to grow, continuing to develop, continuing to exceed within your organization. Now within that, what we're going to be talking about today within the talent management cycle is specifically around performance management. How do we go about coaching employees? And this has 4 critical components that we're going to delve into today. The first is planning, and this is the process when you're going to understand exactly what the role and skills that are necessary for an employee to be successful in their role are, and then you're going to assess that person's specific skills and competencies as they relate to those. So is someone really strong in the area of public speaking, and how important is that to the role? You can be a great public speaker, but if it's not anything that's really pertinent to your role, are there opportunities to make it part of your role in a way that's going to further engage you and make you successful? Or are there other areas where you may need to shore up a person's skills or competencies? And you're going to go through that process, and we'll talk about how to really make that an analytical and step-by-step process in order to ensure that you're properly guiding employees through that. The next phase of that is going to be performing, and that's going to be the part where you share those plans, your assessments, the roles, requirements, and a plan of action with that employee. And this discussion is probably going to be the most challenging part of the particular process for anybody. You're going through it a lot, but it's obviously very emotional for people to get that type of feedback, positive and negative. And inevitably, what always happens is you give 99% positive feedback, and we all glom onto that 1% that was, here's where your areas of opportunity are. So we're going to talk about how we work through that process with employees in order to make sure that they're fully bought in and understand your commitment to them and their ongoing performance. And then these next 2 stages, reviewing and rewarding, are going to happen in a little micro cycle, if you will, in addition to in the larger cycle. So as you've laid out this plan and employees are achieving milestones, and you're going to give them real-time feedback, in addition to having a much larger annual review process. And you're going to be able to reward them through that praise, through additional opportunities, again, at a micro level. So as these one-offs happen, as projects come up, and then annually in the context perhaps of promotions or raises or bonuses. And so we'll talk about all of that and how this all works together through the process of coaching. Now, it's important that we really truly define and understand the expectations and what are we really trying to achieve. And coaching is really defined as the interactive process of guiding an employee through self-reflection, self-observation, and self-improvement. And here's the reality. All of us as individuals come at the world with our own unique set of perspectives. Our parents, said you were smart, you're articulate, you're funny. They defined who we were. Our teachers would emphasize those messages. We have a certain set of experiences that lead us to believe certain things about ourselves and others, and we all have blind spots. And this process of self-reflection is really trying to be open to where are my areas of opportunity, what are the things I really do well so that I know that, can articulate that and put myself in a position to be successful, and what are the things that I don't do as well that I need to figure out how to either shore up to an acceptable level or to continue, or also to excel in. So this process is really about having conversations with people and making sure that they understand the things that they're really good at, the areas where they have areas of opportunity, and what are the things that we even should be working on. If you just naturally excel in public speaking, maybe that you shouldn't be in an analyst role where you never have an opportunity to do that. But you really have to ask yourself, you may be really good at public speaking, but if you don't enjoy it, you certainly don't want to be in a role that's going to require that. So, you just have to really go through that process of understanding. And each individual is going to have to make their own assessments on that. What do they really want to do? What are they really good at? And this process of coaching is just all about helping those individuals recognize those strengths, those opportunities, their long-term career plan, and facilitating a discussion about that. So we really also need to understand why this is so incredibly fundamental. We can't really get into the tactics of how do we go about coaching our team, understanding how it's going to help you and it's going to help your team. So first and foremost, it's going to help your team because they're People innately are motivated to achieve mastery. We want to be successful. We want to be better than we are today. Now, we sometimes limit ourselves with our own beliefs and our own challenges and perspectives on the world. But the reality is that if you ask anybody, they would tell you they want to be great, in whatever context that is. And then everyone has opportunities. I mean, that's the reality of it. And I think we all struggle with that, and inherently we all know that we have opportunities to be better, but that can be a really difficult thing to talk about. And culturally, we're taught that if you acknowledge your opportunities in the areas where you aren't as strong, that you may be looked down upon, or you're not confident. And the reality is that we all have them, and we have to be comfortable with understanding what those are and how to better how to put ourselves in situations to really, truly excel. And that's certainly our manager's responsibility as well, to make sure that we are all performing at our maximum, at our best, and that we're coming together as a whole better than any of us individually. And again, ultimately, this is all about making sure your entire team is working in sync, that everyone is at maximum capacity, efficiency, productivity, and the whole team will thrive as a result of that. So will the company, so will your clients. And it's really important that we all make sure that, we kind of keep that in mind, and that as managers going through this coaching process, that we are articulating that to our team members. This is all about how we all become better, how we all continue to improve, excel, and achieve more. So, as we go into this process of learning how to coach, we're going to go back through these 4 different phases of planning, performing, reviewing, and rewarding. And this first section of planning is probably where you'll spend the most time, concentrated time. You have to go through the process, if you haven't already, of defining core skills and competencies for each role. And that's going to vary. Again, an analyst may need to have a set of analytical and mathematical skills, whereas someone in a sales role may need to have an element of that, but perhaps not as much. It may need to really be focused on how they go about interacting and building relationships, and both written and verbal communication skills. And so you have to go through the process of defining those, because you can't help someone grow and develop in their role without really understanding where it is that they need to be. What are the skills and expectations of that individual? And then once you've lined those out, you can go through the process of identifying and assessing each team member relative to those skills and competencies. So you can go through and say, Susie is great at public speaking, and those math skills really leave a lot to be desired. Or the alternative of great analytical skills, but, Susie is struggling to interact and effectively communicate with members of her team. How do you go about shoring that up? And then you want to identify ways for that individual to leverage their strengths. Too often, we all get caught up, and we inherently do it even to ourselves. Again, you can spend 59 of 60 minutes in a performance review talking about all the things you do great. Spend 1 minute, a very small percentage of time, talking about your areas of opportunity, and we all walk away from those performance reviews thinking about, we're not perfect. We're not, there's this area that they said one bad thing, and we glom onto it, and we don't really stop and appreciate all the things that we do well. And so it's really important that we focus on those strengths, those things that come so naturally to us that are our gifts, and we make sure we're building on those, we're leveraging those in the team environment, and that we're also making sure that we are rounded, fully contributing individuals to our teams. So as we go about this process of planning, I put together this sample grid for you all to kind of see how I would typically go about this. But what I would do is I would create a set of skills and competencies, and I would bucket them. So you may have communication skills, you may have an analytical skills, you may have relationship skills. And then really delineate what are the specific tactics and what are the specific behaviors that you would want to see out of a member of your team. Or really, you think about the optimal member of a person, the optimal team member in this particular role, and what would that look like? And so in this particular example, I said, communicate in a respectful tone and manner. And then you identify how important is that in the grand scheme of the role. And in most roles, this one is going to be pretty important. And so you would label that as high, and then you would assess whether or not that employee is strong in that area. If the employee is not strong in that area, you're going to want to focus on it because it's an opportunity. On the next line where you have listen actively and communicate effectively with others, if this is both important to the role and the person's really strong in that area, you want to make sure that you're putting them in a position to leverage that strength on a regular basis. What are things that they can continue to do to excel in that area and flex that strong muscle, if you will, so that it doesn't in any way become weak or unused. You don't want it to atrophy, so to speak. And so you just go through this whole process for all of these behaviors that are associated with a particular skill or competency in order to assess if you need to be spending time on it. If a particular behavior or attribute is not important to a role and a person isn't good at it, you can spend time assessing whether long-term they're going to need to shore it up, and you could choose to prioritize it, but I probably wouldn't. If it's not important to the role and it's not important to the individual, there doesn't really seem to be much of a reason to spend time on it. You really want to spend areas to leverage that person's strengths and to get their opportunities up to the baseline in such a way that it does not hinder their ability to perform holistically. The next thing you're going to want to do after you've identified where are these areas where you want to focus is you are going to want to make sure that you're setting up action plans, very clear goals, and you're establishing those. I like to think of it in two buckets. One, setting up opportunities to learn through formal training. That may be a classroom setting, it may be webinars, it may be conferences. These can really span the gamut based on the resources of your organization, if you have a budget for each individual's formal training or not. But there's certainly a number of low-cost solutions for many things that you can obtain, and there are all kinds of really neat online learning like lynda.com and udemy.com, and there's another one I can't think of right now, but that allow you to go online and take those virtual classes and courses, if you will, that have some really practical hands-on training and that an employee can do on their own time and that isn't cost prohibitive. Another thing that you're going to want to do to really make sure that this information and training is sticking is to give that employee real-world opportunities to implement those skills. And you're going to want to help them create that. They may not know. So it's really important that we go through this process of action planning. And I will tell you guys this. People don't fail to take these steps because they know what those steps are. A lot of times they're completely overwhelmed by the process and just don't know what to do. And depending upon the person, their level of experience, I would handle it one of two ways. Either I would say, here's what we need to achieve, and I would ask that person to go figure out what some of those situations may be and then provide them support in editing and refining them. Or I may choose to go ahead and just create that for them. So newer members of the team, I may take those types of steps for and just say, here's some training that I've already vetted and already know would be a right fit for what we're talking about. So you can go either way. But what's really important about it, if you do put the ball back in their court, that you set a follow-up date and an expectation about when that work would be due, so to speak, when you guys would follow up and evaluate whatever training courses those individuals will find. And again, you're going to want to make sure to give them really clear expectations. These are the types of things that you're looking for in a training program. This is your budget, if you will, for that training program. This is the timeline. So you're not going to want to decide that you want to go to a seminar 12 months from now in Switzerland if your budget is $200 and your timeline is to have this completed this quarter. So really make sure that that employee knows the bounds of what they're looking for when they go on that search so that they don't feel overwhelmed or like they were not successful and that they're failing. So what I typically do is I would say, okay, here are our action items. So we have 3 things on the communication styles in the last example. One, you're going to take a true, genuine communication styles training to understand how other people communicate and what that looks like, how you rate in that, and that's your traditional DISC or Myers-Briggs, but in the vein of how to communicate. And then you would do some written communication training if that was also an area of opportunity. And I would be really specific of that should be completed by this next period of time. And then immediately after, giving this written opportunity to exercise some of these skills by being the person to compile and summarize meeting notes. And for some of us, we take for granted the things that we inherently realize or the way we think about things, but you'd be surprised how many people don't know how to use bullets or don't know how to bucket content and information or don't know how to take a person from A to Z through a thought process. And so it's really important that we give people those opportunities and we help them. And you would never just say, okay, you're going to be the one that takes all the meeting minutes from now on and sends them out to the team. You're going to say, okay, you take the notes, and then we're going to sit down and review them and talk about how we could bucket them, how to put them in a meaningful order, how to format it such that it resonates with people, it gets the points across quickly and easily and enables them to be better understood and documented. So really taking them through all those different steps, which again does not come, may seem very basic, but it does not come intuitively to a lot of people, and so we can't take for granted that they inherently will think like that. So this next section, this performing section, is after you've planned and you know what the action items need to be. You have to sit down with your team member and communicate that. And it's a slightly collaborative process to put out there what you see the skills and competencies as, how you would rate that individual, how important it is for the role, and making sure that they understand all of that. And then together you'll refine it. And a team member may come back and say, I respectfully disagree, and I think I did this really well. And you may say, I changed my perspective of your rating based on that, and you're right, and I didn't think about that particular example. You don't have to, but it is meant to be a collaborative process to assess where the person's at. What I would say is if you feel really confidently that a person is not where they need to be, sometimes team members who are struggling with that feedback will just start providing you with a ton of different examples. And this is why what you say is not the case, and that can be a mechanism to distract, whether it's intentional or not, and that's certainly the end result. So if you know someone isn't performing or going into a meeting knowing that, then I would definitely say stay strong and stick to your talking points about why you feel this is the actual assessment for a particular individual in that role, and have really clear thoughts going into that that you stick to. And then you want to make sure that you're effectively communicating the objective of the plan. This conversation will be, while not the most amount of time, will probably be the most emotionally taxing for you and the individual. And so it's going to be really important that you also spend time preparing for that conversation to make sure that you're communicating what you need to communicate in the most effectively possible, that it's received by your team member in a way that's going to maximize their results, and that you go into it knowing that it's not a single conversation. It's going to be an ongoing dialogue, and your real goal in that is to facilitate a conversation and an ongoing dialogue that's very collaborative, and that you're making sure that your team member knows that this is all about their performance. And so you really want to start with, this is all about how I help you become better. This is all about how we as a team continue to excel for the sake of the company, for the sake of our clients, for the sake of any of our end users. It's really important that we all, I will say, if this is new to your organization, you need to articulate two things. The first being everyone is going to be participating in this process, and so no one's being singled out. This isn't a performance issue. This is how we operate it at our best, and the process that we're going to surround around ensuring that we continue to move in that direction. And two, that people really truly understand that in order to achieve our best, we do have to put a process around it. And when that's new to an organization, it can be very overwhelming. And again, individuals can feel singled out, so making sure that they know those two things. First of all, that they're not alone, and two, this is just a process by which that we are going to leverage in order to maximize our effectiveness in our roles and as a team, will be really helpful to them. And once you've established that, and you'll spend some time on it, and for those of you who've never done any type of performance or formal coaching with members of your team, I even like to start out performance reviews by just acknowledging, some people find this uncomfortable. Do you find it uncomfortable? Do you have anxiety about being here? And helping diffuse that and acknowledge it. Because a lot of times people may come in with that anxiety and not be able to let it go, and they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? What have I done wrong? There's going to be something wrong in here. And they come into it with that perspective, maybe because they've had a bad experience with a previous manager, or because they hear these horrible horror stories from other individuals and think that that's how it has to be done. So by acknowledging and diffusing that anxiety, a lot of people find they're stressful. This is meant to be a collaborative process for us to determine how we best support you as an organization, me as your manager, how we make sure that we're all continuing to perform to the best of our capabilities. It can really go a long way to make sure that that individual knows that you're on that side to diffuse that anxiety so that they're really able to open up and be receptive to the feedback, to their strengths, to their areas of opportunity, and to understand why it is that we're having that discussion. They're not being picked on or anything like that. I'm a big fan of using we language. We need to achieve these things. I will caution you, for those of you who are big fans of we language as well, make sure action items are very clearly delineated. I had a manager once who would always use we language, and simultaneously with using we language, he was telling me to stop doing everything that ever got mentioned that we needed to do. And then he would say, we need to do this, we need to do that. And that's the third time he said, we need to go hire a vice president, da, 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 da. I said, when you keep saying we, do you mean me? He said, obviously. And I said, well, that wasn't really clear, especially we're having two different conversations of one, I shouldn't go do everything that we talk about. And then two, he's using the we language. So make sure that as it relates to deliverables and your expectations, you clearly outline, we are working on this to ensure that you are as efficient and productive as possible for the organization as you can, that we make sure that you are able to perform, able to achieve the next level, able to grow in your career. Whatever those we's might be, but make sure that as you're going to the action items, you're very clear about this person needs to go, you need to go and find this training course by this date to achieve these things. And here's what I will do to support you. That's how we are doing it, but make sure that that individual knows. Because the last thing you would ever want is to go into one of these conversations, particularly as it relates to development, and keep saying we, and this person's waiting for you to do something, thinking we are going to do it. So you really want to make sure that they're able to continue to excel and gain confidence, especially if you're new to this process, and that they're able to get some wins. You're going to want to make sure that, especially as you're talking about both strengths and weaknesses, to demonstrate examples, to give examples to demonstrate your points. You're going to want to make sure that this person truly understands what you're talking about. I find, especially as it relates to opportunities, we inherently, we don't mean to, but we are defensive. We all have a certain perspective of ourselves, and whenever someone else's views differ from ours, what we can find is at particular points, we will actually completely disregard what that person just told us. And I was on a webinar once, and the speaker said, anytime somebody's giving you feedback, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, take it as an opportunity to appreciate that that's their perspective. And at the end of the day, their perception is reality. It's their reality. And so take it as an opportunity to say, that's an interesting point. I want to understand how you've gotten there and what I could do to make sure that we're all working towards the same goal. There are going to be times that feedback is important and other times when it's not, and you're going to have to exercise your judgment in that. But giving those examples can be really, really powerful to help demonstrate to members of your team exactly where areas of opportunity are. I had a team member at one point who, as we started going through this process, we would have our monthly meetings and we would document it, where things where she was really excelling and things where she wasn't. And after 3 or 4 months, she started to see that the same opportunities continued to present themselves. Her work was not thorough, it was not reviewed. So she would send it out, and what would inevitably happen is she was undermining other people's confidence in her ability to do her job. And though she was really good at it, she was just too quick to send an email with data that was inaccurate, and she wasn't leveraging the internal checks and balances she had of other people to review her work and to give her a sanity check. And over time, she started to realize that, and that was really tough to absorb. But it is really great when you can start to document those examples, not in order to, hold, not with a negative perspective and not to hurt anyone's feelings or micromanage them, but to really demonstrate to them This is an ongoing problem, and every time you say, it was a one-off, it was a one-off, it'll never happen again, but you're not changing anything, and so it continues to happen. And so it continues to happen, and this is the impact on your career, on your ability for other people to see you as a leader in this organization. And so to be able to really draw that out and help them understand. If she were getting wrong data from somebody over and over and over again, I can assure you she would not think it was not a big deal, and she'd be the first person to be frustrated by it. And so it can really help people when you are able to pull that out for them. Additionally, you're going to want to make sure that this person is committed to the plan. And there are times, depending on how many opportunities there are relative to how many strengths, that it can be really challenging for people to commit in that moment. So you can do two things. You can either give them an opportunity to review the development plan that you put together that we'll talk about in a few moments, or you can go ahead and just establish a regular follow-up meeting. I mean, development and coaching doesn't happen overnight. It's not one conversation and you're done. It is a continuous process of following up, helping a person be more self-aware, helping them grow, helping them identify where they have areas of opportunity, and then move in that direction. And so it's going to be a lot of little individual sessions. And so I typically like to do, depending on the person and the role and again, the strengths to opportunities and how serious those opportunities are, anywhere from every 2 weeks to once a month to establish a follow-up schedule and to sit down and keep having those discussions. If you can tell in that moment that a person is not taking a conversation while they're really struggling, I would prefer to go ahead and schedule some time with them a little bit further on the next morning, the next afternoon. Give them a little bit of time to really stop and reflect and get their thoughts together, and then come back to it. But what that's going to do is give you another opportunity to reestablish your ideal outcome of helping this person advance in their career, to improve the outcomes for the team and the organization and its clients. And it's going to give you the ability to establish the continuity, that this is going to be a process where we're going to start getting comfortable with having these kinds of dialogues on a regular basis. But again, it gives a person a little bit of space to digest the information, compose themselves. Think about, their examples of, and a lot of people will come away from this going, well, I think I really do really well in these areas. And maybe you don't fault that, or maybe you wholeheartedly agree. But it's really important that we give people that time, and depending upon their personalities and how long it takes them to process information, that can be a really important part. And again, I always like to end those meetings on a light note by reiterating that I'm here to help them grow and develop in their career, to acknowledge that these conversations can be tough, especially please acknowledge it if you can tell someone is struggling, and to make sure that it's very clear what our follow-ups and action items are going to be. So it may be scheduling another meeting, and maybe you sending them the development plan that you've put together and the format that you've put all of this information. Now, the next point is reviewing. Again, this is going to be at a micro and a macro level. At a micro level, what I like to do is when I see somebody really do something great and they're leveraging their strengths and they're making great progress towards an area of opportunity, I go right into the plan and I make the note so that it's there next time, and I'm not, scrambling trying to think of all the things off the top of my head, and I'm prepared for that meeting. And I could say, on September 10th, you did a great job of demonstrating your commitment in this team meeting and being collaborative and identifying a challenge that we were experiencing as a team, in addition to having a solution available. And this was, a win on all fronts. Very specific on what that person did that was a great opportunity, and then, again, specifics on what may have been a missed opportunity. You had the chance to exercise this new skill, and you didn't, and that's okay, but just let's start recognizing that was a chance, and did you know it? My boss has been giving me some feedback on not being so service-oriented, which I certainly can't help given my background having started at Starbucks. But apparently I leave. I may have shared with you guys last month, but I leave, every time I leave a room, I say, is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything else I can do for you? And it's so funny because I literally, as it turns out, don't know how to leave a room without saying that. And it comes from a very good place. But her feedback has been that it may come across as I'm subservient to my peers, which I would have just never thought of. And having that feedback, it's probably been 6 to 8 weeks since she first mentioned it, and I've started to notice it, and I did it last night in front of her. And I thought to myself, this is hard. It is hard to get in front of yourself, but the more opportunities you have to recognize it, and that's what you want to give your team members. You want to create this opportunity for self-observation. She didn't have to say anything. I knew exactly what I'd done as soon as the word escaped my lips, and that's progress. And hopefully, within the next few weeks, we can get to a point where the words don't escape my lips, and I am properly establishing myself as a peer and not as someone who's going to do anything that you would ask me in that particular moment, and as a means to be helpful. So you're going to want to make sure that you're really establishing that regular feedback for a team member. I had someone who, again, did a great job in last week's staff meeting of articulating a challenge to another team member that she's historically had problems. Their communication styles are just different. And so whenever she provides feedback, it comes across as condescending. And she did an amazing job last week of being really collaborative and demonstrating that through her word choice and body language. And as soon as we left that meeting and we're walking back to our offices, I said, hey, do you have a second? She came to my office and that was perfect. I mean, she could not have possibly executed it better. And to make sure that she knew that right then and there, because it took certainly a lot of effort. It wasn't natural for her. She had to be very thoughtful as she went into that meeting about how to do it. And she executed. And it's important that people know that they're getting that positive feedback too. And again, it can be really easy to focus on some of the opportunities instead of the strengths. And then, and you're going through these review cycles, ask people, what do you need from me? And I'll sit down sometimes with my boss and I'll say, okay, we were at a happy hour a few weeks ago, and some of the guys in the group were being offensive is probably the right word. They just weren't thoughtful about who their audience was. And I was the only woman at that end of the table, and so they were making somewhat crude jokes that I actually didn't find funny. But then what do, right? You're stuck in this situation where I'm trying to decide, do I correct them and tell them they're offensive and be the stick in the mud, or do I laugh? And so instead I just sat there quietly. So then I'm the girl with no personality, which I do in fact have. It's just not appropriate dialogue at all, even at a work happy hour. And when I asked her, I went back to her and I said, I need to know what you would do in this situation. And she said, well, I would have told him to knock it off, and then I would have left. And she said, so please feel empowered to do that. They're not going to think you're a stick in the mud. They're going to realize that they were the ones that were behaving inappropriately. And so it's really important, that as the manager, and who's this person is looking up to you as a mentor, and for your guidance, that you're openly asking, what do you need from me? I'm here for you. I'm going to help you attain these goals. What guidance do you need? I'm going to continue to provide the feedback, and every time you give the feedback, this is all about helping you grow and develop. I get no great pleasure out of giving you, feedback, and I think a lot of times people think that as managers we're like, oh, I can't wait to tell them what they did wrong, and au contraire, it's one of the most painful things that we do as managers is to have to point this out, because it's tough to give the feedback, and we know it's tough for people to receive it. So make sure that you're clearly communicating, I want to help you. What can I do to help you? Now, on the reward section, again, this is also going to happen at both a micro and a macro level. At a micro level, it may be a little thank you note or a handwritten note to say, great job. If you have like a reward or sticker system, like a drop in the bucket kind of thing, like the Gallup organization does as a way to recognize your colleagues, you can go ahead and do that and give that to somebody as a little thank you. You can just drop them an email and say, thank you for this. That was a great opportunity. I really appreciate your effort. You want to make sure you're acknowledging those wins at every opportunity. And there are people who appreciate that feedback and not, and you'll have to scale that depending upon what your team members need. I have a colleague I used to work with who would get so upset whenever I would tell him thank you, because he would say, that's my job, Adrian. And so I scaled it back on purpose, but I always made sure that he knew. And so it was more comfortable for him, I think, for me to send an email, which I needed to do, and then he could delete it without having to acknowledge it. Then when I, say, went to his office and sat down and said, hey, I just want to make sure that you know how much I appreciate this. And he obviously had to kind of grow the other way too and realize how much other people want to say thank you. You also want to make sure that, these opportunities and rewards they're not necessarily tangible or an email or something that's small. It could be you've seen someone's really been exercising their new skills. Give them opportunities. And it may seem small. Again, having somebody else do the meeting minutes. I mean, there's no way that seems like a win, right? And unless they're getting an opportunity to learn something new. They're getting that one-on-one time with you, and that is a means of reward, right? You've gone through this process, and now I want you to be able to do it to grow and develop. It helps the team out, and it gives you the opportunity to continue to exercise those skills. Additionally, at kind of the macro level, it may include things like a bonus or a raise or a promotion, or at least starting to discuss what those could look like in the future and what the milestones are to achieve to get that. But you want to make sure that people again, it's not all about the reward, and a lot of it's is more intrinsic than extrinsic, but you want to make sure that you're communicating that and that's properly aligned with your culture. If your culture isn't going to do bonuses or, and as an example, culturally at BIP we believe in kind of ad hoc bonuses and raises as appropriate, so there's no annual process for that. You would want to make sure you weren't setting that expectation with a member of your team, that you understand what your company's culture and policies dictate and what the expectations are, so you can properly set those expectations with members of your team. Because there's nothing worse than believing, they're going to get a bonus or a raise or a promotion, and those opportunities aren't formal or don't actually exist at all, and then they're disappointed. And so it's better to under-promise and over-deliver, yes, than to over-promise and under-deliver. So there's your kind of reward cycle. And so all of these 4 steps make up your performance management cycle, which is this element of coaching. So you're going to plan and understand what the person needs to be achieving in their role, assess that person next to those skills and competencies, and then lay out a plan for that individual. What are the action items that you would recommend them taking? And again, you can put some element of that back in their court. Or you can dictate the whole plan as you see fit and as it's appropriate. And then you're going to want to make sure that that person understands this performance process, that you're really fully communicating what those expectations are, that they understand this is for the benefit of their growth, development, and career, and that you're there to help support them, and it's going to be an ongoing dialogue. And at first it may be uncomfortable, and they may hesitate to tell you things and to have an open dialogue, but it should be very collaborative. And then you're going to go through these micro review and reward cycles wherein you're giving people feedback on specific items, praising them for things that they've done really well. And then additionally, that you're kind of doing that at a macro level as well. So you're having these annual reviews and setting up these expectations and sitting down holistically to review progress through the year. A lot of times we're so busy looking forward that we forget to look back and appreciate all that we've accomplished. And then you're implementing any reward systems that you can based on your culture and the expectations of the organization. So my favorite part now is going to be our action planning and question and answer session. So for those of you who have minimized your chat window, over in the top right-hand corner of your screen, there should be an arrow. And if you click it down, then you'll see a section for chatting. And that could potentially also be minimized, in which case you would just click on the little triangle again to expand it, and you can send a message either to everyone or just to Caroline and I, and we'll be happy to read those out. But the objective of this particular section of the session is to go about committing ourselves to one action plan. What's one thing we want to do differently coming out of this session? Because what we know is that actually taking some type of action within 3 weeks of a training session will improve your results by as much as 60%. And for people who don't do anything within 3 weeks, it's knowledge they've gained but not implemented, and so they're less likely to ever do anything with it. And at this point, right, you've already invested 45 minutes. So this process of committing yourself to one thing to do in the next 3 weeks or so based on this particular performance cycle can really help you improve your skills as a manager and a leader in your organization. So for those of you who'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. If you want it in your chat window, tell us what's one action item that you want to take to begin improving your ability to coach your team. That could be anything from going ahead and putting a an invitation on the calendar to a member of your team that you need to sit down with, or blocking out some time to actually go through the review process, or you may have to start all the way at the beginning and really understand what the skills and competencies of the job description need to be for each member of your team. And you may have to break it off and just start with one. It's a lot to break off, and so you want to make sure that you are putting a realistic goal on your calendar that's better aligned with what you are currently capable of doing, what's appropriate given your current role, and what your team needs. So someone says, I'm going to begin assessing my employees' strengths and opportunities versus the skills and competencies needed for my team. That's great. And then, go ahead and rank too how important those are for the particular role. Again, because people can be really great at the skills and competencies, but if competency is less important in that particular role, then you can make sure that you can just drop it off and not get distracted by it. Someone else says, I'm starting from ground zero. Define skills and competencies for my employees. Absolutely, and you would be surprised, for those of you that are joining us today, how many, and even at our company, our president keeps saying, do we have a job description for the receptionist? And we do, but because we built it out last year, even though we've had a receptionist for 7 years. And so a lot of times, skills and competencies and job descriptions are not created for employees and roles, or they're not documented in a way that it's easy to get to them again. And so a lot of people will be starting from ground zero. Someone else is, they're going to solicit feedback from each member of their team as to how I'm meeting their expectations. I think it's fantastic. And the coaching process definitely goes both ways. A lot of times team members will be hesitant to give that feedback for fear of some type of retaliation. And I think, as you're going through setting up some type of recurring meeting, being really honest, and I'll tell members of my team, like, I am openly at work talking about the fact that I do this thing where I offer assistance before I leave any room. And they know, and they give me a look when they see me do it, and they're helping coach me in the exact same way. It makes you human. It makes people realize that you also want to grow and develop. You don't think you're perfect. You don't think you have all the answers. And that makes you real. It makes you vulnerable. If you guys haven't seen any of Brene Brown's talks, she talks her TED Talk, she talks about vulnerability and how important all of that is and our ability to trust others. Someone else says they would like to determine the effect immediate feedback has on employee engagement and motivation. I can use this more effectively to foster progress. Absolutely, and that's the reality of it. It takes so much time for all of us to process feedback. If you guys haven't heard, I love the statistic that it takes 6 times for somebody to hear something before it truly resonates. So 6 times before you really 100% get it. And so we do this whole thing where we tell people in an email, we cover it in a staff meeting, we send it out again after email, we cover it the next week in a staff meeting. And it feels so repetitive when you're the one who's giving that information to others. But you would be surprised that they must get distracted or not read emails. I have no idea. But we sat in a staff meeting, we had covered something 5 times in the last 2 months. We sat in a staff meeting last week and somebody said, I didn't know that. Where have you been? But it happens, and we have to realize that people get distracted. They pick up their phone, they're looking at their email. They had their kids were in a bad mood or stayed up all late and they didn't get enough sleep and they just weren't with it. And so continuing to provide that feedback is really important and on an ongoing basis so they can really absorb the information and start to see it in a more regular way than as opposed to I'm going to stop and assess myself once a year. I'm going to think about my opportunities for this on a daily or weekly basis with more frequency such that I can really absorb the information. Someone else says they're going to provide positive and constructive feedback along the way rather than waiting for a set time or date to avoid frustration. I wholeheartedly agree with that, and it can be so awkward at first because you do that whole thing where you're like, oh, it's going to become a conversation, but then once you schedule time and you have somebody in your office, it suddenly seems like a bigger deal than it really is. And so I'm a big fan of right after a meeting or something else saying, hey, I wanted to catch up with you. Do you mind swinging by? And it's less formal. And that makes people, I find, more open. They don't feel like they're being accosted or they're in trouble. But it's a great opportunity for both positive and negative feedback just to quickly give that to them real time. Someone else says that reviews are done by functional managers but not done in project teams. The goal is to do an initial assessment cycle within the team. The goal is improve understanding of the team roles and expectations by team members. Fantastic. And, you know, I think a lot of us end up in these environments where we're providing feedback to people who don't directly report to us. And I think, you know, a great way to do that is to discuss it in the way, in the context of the specific work that we're trying to do, whether it's a particular project team or something along those lines. And it's all about how we communicate and how we make the most of this project team. So I love that idea. Someone else says, people are so used to the words coaching and action plans as being disciplinary that it can be hard for people to really get that you're trying to help them and it's not a negative disciplinary thing. Absolutely. And for those of you, and there are a lot of companies who use different kinds of words. I mean, if you guys can think of something creative that's, you know, maybe culturally fitting, that can really help also. We've always used the term development plan as opposed to, because you'll think of like performance improvement plans, and those are usually disciplinary. And so I do like the term development plan, career development plan. Anything that says this is positive and not disciplinary can be really, really important. That's what people always hear. And continuing to reiterate it, again, 6 times. Probably say it 6 times in multiple conversations. And our intrinsic understanding that these types of things are disciplinary just kind of comes out and grabs us. And so the more you can reiterate that this is all about helping somebody grow and develop in their career for the benefit of themselves and the organization and your team, the more it can really start to establish it as being very positive. And be particularly thoughtful about how you're engaging with people on your team who have a tendency to gravitate towards the negative, because they will really latch onto those items. And maybe you even acknowledge, I mean, depending on the person and your particular relationship with them, maybe you even acknowledge it. We have a member, have had a member of my team where I always acknowledge it. I know this is your natural inclination. It's going to be to latch onto this one area of opportunity. I need you not to do that. And that helps give that feedback too. You know, it helps ground them and get everybody back to neutral so that we can be as productive and effective as we possibly can. So we're coming up on time. If you guys have any other questions, you are welcome to email them to Caroline or to me. We'd be happy to answer those for you. Caroline also sent out this morning, so if you didn't get it, please feel free to let us know, a copy of a kind of a template, pretty standard development plan that I've seen in 3 of the companies that I've worked for. And the entire goal of it is to identify short and long term where a person wants to be, what are strengths that they can leverage, and then where are the areas of opportunity that they'll need to true up, and to create some SMART goals around that. And there are also some tips in the very back of it around creating SMART goals, how to go about truly developing and growing, and, you know, whether it's putting time in your calendar or committing yourself to a class, something of some regularity, because the process of growth and development takes time and regularity. And that's, you know, part of the intent behind creating regular meetings with your team is to establish a culture of regular feedback and, you know, consistent growth and development. And it's not just once a year. So thank you all very much. Next month we will be talking about how to go about leading your team through vision, through change, and to make sure that we all understand exactly how to go about doing that as we go through this talent cycle. Thank you all very much. Have a great afternoon. And Lori, we will get that presentation over to you and the handout.